Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. In the video, I'm going to talk about the election in Pakistan, what's happened, what the consequences are likely to be. Well, there are just some preliminary results just in, that the whole story hasn't been revealed yet, but looks like Tehreek-e-Insaf is going to win. That's the Movement for Justice in English, but is always known by its Urdu name. That's Imran Khan's political party. He founded it way back in 1996, and they failed to win a single seat in the National Assembly. If you know anything about Pakistan, you'll be aware that Imran Khan was the captain of the cricket team in the early 90s, highly successful too, winning the World Cup. And of course, cricket is the most important thing in Pakistan after Islam. Anyway, his party has really had an extraordinary breakthrough. For decades, Pakistani politics was dominated by the duopoly, the Pakistan Muslim League and the Pakistan People's Party. So Khan was an anti-corruption campaigner. He opposed kleptocracy, which is partly why he didn't get terribly far in politics, because there are vote banks, and I'm afraid to say there's a lot of electoral malpractice, a lot of bogus votes are cast, a lot of valid votes are invalidated. One of my friends was active in the Pakistan People's Party way back in 1988, when military rule came to an end, and he had 3 ID cards, all with his real name, but all with a false date of birth, making him 21, not 19, which really was. So he could legally vote 3 times. And he said the PPP High Command knew this was going on a huge scale, and their argument was, well, the other party cheat loads, so if we don't cheat, we don't stand a chance. Anyway, so the PPP looks like they're going down quite badly. Remember, that was the party of the Bhutto family, and to many it seems little more than a vehicle for that family. So Bilal Bhutto Zardari is the fourth generation dynast, and perhaps he's seen as too much of a privileged playboy, having grown up abroad, and his main qualification for that position was his mother's name. And that's that. He's never worked a day in his life outside politics. Incidentally, there are rumours that he's actively gay. It makes no odds to me, but in Pakistan, I can tell you that is not good news for somebody's public image. And Nawaz Sharif, well, the thrice former Prime Minister, returning from London extraordinarily to face a 10-year jail sentence. Why is he coming back then? Perhaps he's fairly confident that he's not going to have to serve time in the slammer. Money talks, certainly, in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. The Panama Papers revealed his filthy funds going abroad. He's one of the richest men in Pakistan, so his party's in trouble. Previously, it had a very close relationship with the military, and of course, it's the top brass who really run the country. I think Zia al-Haq said, whoever has the Army Chief of Staff's chair, he really calls the shots. He's the Lemon's crise, and they're not too subtle about it. Or perhaps even more so the ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence. That's the secret service, both inside Pakistan and abroad. So to some extent, I think it's because the deep state has obviously chosen that Tehreek-e-Insaf should be given a shot. The 2 major parties are discredited, but the PPP seems to be in more serious trouble than the Pakistan Muslim League. The PPP was very strong in the interior of Sindh, both among Sindhi speakers and Saraiki speakers, less so in the Punjab and the other provinces. The Muslim League was very strong in Punjab, which contains about 50% of the country's population, but Tehreek-e-Insaf has made inroads there. Tehreek-e-Insaf was somewhat strong where, in what's now the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as in that's where Khan comes from, but the Jamaat-e-Islami was very strong there, which is more or less openly pro-Taliban, even though the Taliban has carried out dozens of bomb attacks in Pakistan, and that attack where they deliberately shot dead 100 schoolboys. Despite that, there is a significant segment of public opinion which does back them. Slightly depends on which action they're carrying out. If they're killing Americans in Afghanistan, a lot of Pakistanis heartily approve of that. If they're killing school children in Pakistan, a lot of people are against that. I have to say some are even for, because they say, oh well, it's a sacrifice that's got to be made, or so long as they kill kids from the right family, that's okay. Anyway, so the military is not indifferent to public opinion. They don't want to go totally against public opinion. go along with it, manage it worst they can. Moreover, it's often they say that they don't like the Jamaat Islami before, and the Muslim League has got some sympathies in that direction, but this is they've got mass support and so on, and the alternative often seems so bad, as in real extremist rule, that military dictatorship seems relatively attractive by comparison, and the hardline Islamist parties will have no trouble stumping up the cash so that the military can have state-of-the-art hardware, wouldn't mind another war against India, things like that. And having this frozen conflict over Jammu and Kashmir and having the enmity of India raises the status of the armed forces and makes sure they get plenty of money. A lot of it goes into weapon systems, but the army officers, they have their fat salaries, and the country is somewhat dysfunctional, so the military is one of the few things that really gets things done. So one serves a few years in the military, honorably discharged, he or she has a job for life in one of the other industries, farms, anything owned by the army. Okay, so what happens next? If they can command a majority in the National Assembly, Imran Khan may well be Prime Minister. So it's an extraordinary breakthrough, given the first few years his party's performance was dismal. He is going to likely have to cobble together a coalition with some of the more minor parties. Would the Pakistan People's Party help him out? Quite possibly, though he might be tarnished by some of their bad reputation. He's the Mr. Clean of Pakistani politics. And like just about any Pakistani politician somebody could name, he came from a very well-to-do family, which is why he's able to afford to go to rugby school at Oxford University way back in the 70s, when that was ruinously expensive for Pakistanis, even more so than it is now. However, don't be too optimistic about long-term change. Lord Acton's dictum, power tends to corrupt. Well, I think he's quite an honourable man who's in politics for the right reasons. He could have stayed safe. He could have accepted a position from one of the military rulers, but no, he chose not to do so. I think even his worst enemy doesn't accuse him of graft. The country faces many severe challenges. It's got to contend with the Taliban, which is doing quite well in Afghanistan, ruling half the country, and is not going to go away, and is fairly popular in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as I said, that's formerly Northwest Frontier Province, and indeed in Balochistan. India is growing richer by the day. It's quite a mighty country, and is taken very seriously on the world stage. Has very cordial relations with many African countries, for instance, has its own aid program for developing countries. So India is a potent foe, but the Indians don't want to ruin their prosperity by a major war. So the growing strength of India is a problem for the Pakistanis, whereas Pakistan's kind of on racing to stand still, like trying to run up an escalator, as they're facing a population explosion as healthcare improves, and there's still a fairly high birth rate. So some people still dwell in the most abject poverty. A large minority of Pakistanis are still illiterate. They're not dim, they can be highly intelligent, but they just lived in such straitened circumstances that they never got the chance to go to school, and some people are still malnourished. There's severe pollution in the cities, particularly Karachi, and it's the largest city in the world without a metro system. So how are they going to contend with all these problems? There's a lot of lawlessness along the front with Afghanistan, dacoits in the hinterland, and a lot of public money disappears to the bank of nowhere. Well, Iran presents opportunities from them, especially as the USA and other countries like Saudi are ramping up tensions with Iran. Iran will trade through Pakistan quite a lot. Pakistan can cheat on sanctions and trade with the Iranians. However, that will hack off the Saudi Arabians. The relationship with Saudi Arabia is very important. Nawaz Sharif was to some extent in the pocket of the Saudis. His granddaughters married into them. Remember when he went into exile in 2000? He lived in Pakistan for a while, he lived in Saudi for a while, and Riyadh sees him as their man in Pakistan. They will not be happy about him going to prison, so they may well twist arms to get him out of prison. He may well go to be in house arrest, or a man with enough money can live well in prison. It's a bit like the United Kingdom in the 18th century. You can get anything, you get your whole family, you could live in 5-star circumstances and be nominally in prison. So other difficulties, Trump will take no nonsense from Pakistan, say you can no longer play both sides of the street, we'll no longer give you military aid, and that looks very bad for you with regard to India, because certainly at least a section of the ISI supports the Taliban, and not just morally, financially and with intelligence. but partly because they are Pathans, the Taliban on both sides of the Durand line, and to some extent it's a national movement of the Pathans. Now the Pakistanis don't want their country to break up. They might like some Afghanistan's territory, or indeed have the country as being effectively an extension of Pakistan. For the Pakistanis, it's very difficult to oppose the Taliban, who are the major force in Afghanistan. Things are going their way, so peace talks, that could be good. But does Pakistan really want a genuinely independent Afghanistan, which might well come within India's orbit, back to the 70s, back to the nightmare of having the foe on both frontiers? The Afghan conflict may end, which would be a mixed blessing for Pakistan. The Chinese Economic Corridor represents a golden opportunity for Pakistan, and I'm sure Tehrik-i-Insaf would be keen to seize that opportunity. But their whole mission statement is to reduce poverty in Pakistan, and many people live in impecunious circumstances, as I outlined earlier. How they're going to stop public money being disappeared by avaricious officials, I don't know. And bribery is very widespread, I'm afraid. So I think it would be difficult for him to deliver serious results within the next few years, but to even make some progress would be very commendable.